This is actually the thing that my friends told me, is that they were afraid that the saturated fat from butter was going to be unhealthy, and that's why they were switching to margarine, because that's how they're marketed, is the margarine is more heart healthy. So they wanted to avoid the butter, which is full of
Right.
saturated fat, and get the margarine, which is full of polyunsaturated fat. So then from this journal of from the American College of Cardiologists, they do an overview of all the both the observational data and the experimental data, where they actually interject and change diets. And they look at, I think, over a total of 400,000 people included in all the studies together. And they show that there's actually no evidence, whether you're looking observationally or through experimentation, that saturated fat consumption is related to higher risk of coronary heart disease. So I shared that with him. And then to be fair, I also went and sought information that would prove the opposite. So there's another study I found, and it's titled Effects of Coronary Heart Disease of Increasing Polyunsaturated Fat in Place of Saturated Fat, a systematic review and meta-analysis of randomized control trials. So these are randomized control trials that apparently prove that when you switch from saturated to polyunsaturated fat, you actually have, and what they say is a 19% relative risk reduction. Okay. And so when you actually look through the data, it's actually such a bad study where even the authors themselves, will rank the quality of all the studies that they put together. They rank them from 0 to 5, 5 being the highest, 0 being the lowest. The highest quality of all the studies, there were 8, was 3. Okay. Most of them were 2, only like a couple were 3. And when you take a look at the highest quality studies, there's no difference when they increase polyunsaturated fat versus saturated fat. And then furthermore, when you look at even more closely, when you look at all-cause mortality, right? They were specifically looking at coronary heart disease. But if you look at all-cause mortality, it's no different. So let me explain that a little further, because it's a little bit confusing. So if you're doing a diet intervention, let's say, and you're hoping that the diet intervention is going to reduce coronary heart disease, like heart attacks, death related from heart attacks, then that's great if that happens. But if you have an increase in other types of deaths, then is that actually better? My argument is no. If the all-cause mortality stays the same, then it doesn't matter if the heart attack related deaths have decreased. And if you look at it even further, the amount of increase in the polyunsaturated fat was immense. It was like a tripling of the total amount of polyunsaturated fat that they consumed, but it was only a 19% relative risk reduction. And that's another thing, is what you were talking about in relation to how science is done, and how it's a little bit confusing sometimes for people to quote unquote follow the science, because they use tricky terms like relative risk reduction, because it's not the same as an absolute risk reduction. Let me explain that. So let's say the risk of heart attacks is, let's say, 50%, right? If the relative risk reduction is 19%, then that doesn't mean you just simply take the 50% and subtract 19%, right? It wouldn't be like that. That would be an absolute risk reduction. If it's a relative risk reduction, then you have to find out what 19% of 50 is. So it's about 20%. So that would be 10, right? Something like 10. And so that's where it sounds a lot better when you say 19% relative risk reduction compared to a 10% absolute risk reduction.
Right.
And the data they provide, it doesn't let you figure out what the actual absolute risk reduction is. They obscure the data in a way where you can kind of only estimate what it could be. And by my estimation, it was only a 1 or 2% absolute risk reduction.
So in absolute terms, it's 1 to 2%. In relative terms, it's greater. So to make the numbers look better, you use the bigger one.
And this is where I came across this Minnesota coronary heart experiment, the one that you wanted to talk about.